This is wildlife biologist Eric Orff with my New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife YouTube channel. Here we are midwinter in central New Hampshire, and if I look around here I'll see my bird feeder. A few minutes ago there was a chickadee there, and I have some woodpeckers coming to my suet. On the ground below where I put out seed before I came out here was a good number of juncos. I've had as many as a dozen or more blue jays in the last few minutes at my bird feeder. Chickadee a little bit, not so many chickadees this winter as some other winters. Tufted titmice, 3 different species of woodpeckers have been here today. And I was thinking back at feeding birds. My folks, we lived in London during the early 60s, put out a bird feeder. That's the first I can remember in the early 60s having a bird feeder here in New Hampshire in Londonderry. And my mother, who lives a mile down the road at age 98 and 96, still feeds the birds and spends hours each day. She practically knows each bird by name, whatever she's given them. So my family has long been watchers of birds and feeders of birds in the wintertime. And when I looked out here and saw the chickadee, it reminded me of an article I read this weekend. And one of the first birds I remember lived in Maine. I was 4 or 5 years old. Was the call of a chickadee. So chickadees have been near and dear to me ever since then. So I certainly enjoy and like chickadees, our black-capped chickadees. Well, this week, or Monday or Tuesday, I happened to read in the New Hampshire Union Leader the weekly column put out by the Society for the Protection of Hampshire Forests, often written by Dave Anderson. And this week it's by Carrie Deegan. It is absolutely fascinating. Now, I have talked about chickadees before, and I think I did a PSA when I did them for the WOKQ about chickadees. They can double up in the number of feathers they have in the wintertime. At nighttime they go into a hollow or a tree or maybe a birdhouse overnight and get out of the cold. And they certainly are out to survive the winters here in New Hampshire, which can be very cold. But this article is so fascinating, and there are some other things about chickadees that I did not know and are absolutely fascinating. Well, first of all, it says there that the normal temperature, body temperature of a chickadee is 107 degrees. They have a very high metabolic rate, as you'd expect, and because they are small, chickadees have a larger surface to area to volume ratio, means that they lose heat faster to the surrounding air than, say, the blue jays, which were here. So the chickadee's basic metabolic rate needs to be kept right up. So they fuel this by eating half their body weight each day in food in order to survive. And I never thought about this, but chickadees, like blue jays and crows, hide food in the fall, and they find it over the winter. And I'll see the chickadees lug one seed after another, and you can't necessarily identify each chickadee, but from the rate that they come and go from my feeders at times, I noticed that they seem to come back quite often. So this winter, till yesterday or the night before last, our ground was bare here for over a week. So this winter, January ran 8 degrees above average. So the birds have come and gone in numbers over the winter. When we've had snow like this, we'll have more birds, and when the ground is bare, everybody kind of disappears, or certainly the numbers dwindle when there's more food available for the wild birds. But we know that so chickadees hide food, and this says here the equivalent of a 150-pound person they have to gain 10% of the body weight each day in order to survive the night. And chickadees shiver all night long, as do many animals. So they find half the body weight of food during the day, and they gain about 10% of the body weight. Then they lose that overnight, and they shiver to keep from freezing all night long. So that's like a 150-pound person gaining 15 pounds during the day by eating about 80 pounds of food and then losing that weight overnight. Wouldn't that be nice? So one of the neat things they do, as I mentioned, they actually hide food. And another thing they do, which I did know, is when it gets really cold, they go to a hypothermic or torpor state. So they can kind of go into almost like a temporary hibernation overnight when the temperatures get really down, and their heart rate here is reduced and the body temperature drops by 10 or 15 degrees. So they actually can kind of go into a slumber overnight. But chickadees find their food that they've cached by this really unique thing. They have very good memories. And why is that? It's called spatial memories. And it's controlled by a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which sits just under the cap of the black chickadee, it says here. And scientists at the Rockefeller University in New York have found that the hippocampus increases on size by about 30% every autumn in both adults and juveniles. So the chickadee's brain swells, it grows in the winter, so they can remember where they stored food and what they stored and where. So when they need the most energy, they can go find the food that will give them the greatest number of calories to get them through that next night. So the brain actually increases about 30% every fall, and in the spring it reduces back to its original size. So imagine you're a student on summer vacation. Your brain would shrink. In the fall when you go to school, it would get bigger so you can remember the things that need to be on the test coming up tomorrow or the next day. I just find that so fascinating how animals, every day, there is so much to learn about our fish and wildlife, and chickadees are such an amazing animal. Their brain increases by 30% over the winter so they can remember where they stored food, where and what it is, so they can find it when they need it. It says here, it's great to feed birds because this study in Wisconsin found that chickadees that had access to bird feeders had significantly higher overwintering survival at about 69% compared to about 37% for those that were not fed. But it says if you feed chickadees and you go away for a winter vacation, not to worry, the birds can find ample other food. So chickadees, an amazing bird. Their brain grows 30% so they can remember where they've left things. I wish mine would. There again, Eric Orr from the Hampshire Fish and Wildlife YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you.